fact, I'll start with a bit of it. It's about James Nayler, one of the early Quakers, who certainly suffered in his life. He had his tongue burnt through at one stage. He was branded on the forehead with the letter B. There he is, for blasphemer. He was nearly put to death, and this is 1650, you know. You wouldn't think that by 1650 people would still think it was a good idea to execute blasphemers. I mean, we just had a civil war, which was partly about religious freedom. Anyway, I'll just start off by reading a little bit of the first section, the second section of Nayler. This is where he's setting out, around about 1650. He's just fought through the Civil War in the Parliamentary Army. He was at the Battle of Dunbar, which is a great victory for the new model army over the Scots, who suffered terrible losses. Anyway, he's leaving home. This instant now, in sunlight of 4 centuries, I see a mare and foal disturbed while grazing, as my dog barks poetry as best he can, to urge me, gateward bound, not knowing whither, to decline to give up my estate, cast out my money, and witness to redemption from the world. They shrug themselves from reverie and lift their heads to see me turn my face away from my own fields. St. Mary Woodkirk is engaged with God in its churchyard on the Leeds to Dewsbury Road. The doors are locked. It is the truth I hear in my own voice that makes me tremble, and I'm no more a member of that sweet society, that seeking church. Our adversary must deploy his wiles, and there is beating of the air in trusting to a metaphor. If you are doubtful, stop your ears and do not look me in the eye, or else abide while patience brings us clarity. The plough I left embedded in its furrow becomes a tongue to till men's minds. The next poem is a Petrarchan sonnet, ladies and gentlemen, with its octet and its sestet and its volta, and it's about Petrarch, so it had to be a Petrarchan sonnet. It's really about the idea of trying to invent an aphorism. So I'm writing about a long lunch in a lovely cafe in a place called Fontaine de Vaucluse. Petrarch lived for a long time. It was his favourite place. And the idea is, can we think up an aphorism? So we'll see what happens. I end up calling him a laureate and a lover, which is fair enough. I also call him a fixer and an alpinist. He was a fixer, all right. He was a diplomat for Pope Clement V. And he was also an alpinist. He was the first person, I believe, of whom we have a record of climbing a mountain for fun. He climbed up Mont Ventoux just to see the view from the top. He's the first person to do that. They didn't do that in the Middle Ages. He only started doing that at the beginning of the Renaissance. And also Petrarch was a great collector of Roman and Greek manuscripts. So he did, in a way, help to start the Renaissance personally. And I do, in fact, invent an aphorism here. I hope you're impressed by it. Petrarch, I've dreamed up a maxim for you, apropos of nothing. Please excuse such importunity. It's hardly news that I have yet to climb my Mont Ventoux. It harks back to a long lunch long ago in a basement cafe, level with the shoes of passers-by in Fontaine de Vaucluse. The challenge: create an aphorism, now. No chance. But later on, I tried again. Nothing comes to hand by accident. Makes sense. In fact, it's downright clever, if I'm honest. Rien se produit par hasard à la main. You'd know that, father of the Renaissance, laureate and lover, fixer, alpinist. His next poem is called Taliesin. So I suppose it's partly about the ancient Welsh bard, but it's really more about going back in imagination to one of my bare student flats ages and ages ago and reading Robert Graves, The White Goddess. Taliesin, as I'm sure you know, was a child of Ceridwen, and Ceridwen was the guardian of the cauldron of poetic imagination. And in fact, she brought forth Taliesin after pecking up some corn in the shape, when she was in the shape of, she changed shape all the time. When she was in the shape of a hen, she pecked up some corn and became pregnant with Taliesin. Sounds true enough to me. The key won't turn because the door's not locked. As if you thought you'd not be gone for long, then disappeared for 60 years. Someone has been and emptied out the place, leaving a cold, thin, hippie, joss stick smell. But Robert Graves is where he often was, propped open on the mantelpiece. And here's that riddle from the Book of Hengist, in English from the ancient Welsh, marked by a faded bus ticket to Crumpsall. A dog barks somewhere, answered by a yell, half human in the echoes of the street. And now you listen to an empty grate. The fire is dead. So are your words, it whispers, unless you're mad and dream like Taliesin, wily in his many guises, that you'll become the grain that's picked up by Ceridwen and reborn in song to carry home the yearned-for outright prizes, while rivals squawk in hen-yard dust. The next poem is called Ex Sublimis, which means from a great height. It has an epigraph from Ezekiel. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean, and from all your idols will I cleanse you. Actually, the poem actually comes from something I seem to remember I saw once on a visit as a tourist to Trinity College, Dublin, a figure in an academic gown up a tall ladder trying to reach a book. It was exactly like a bat. And, anyway, this is an academic poem in tribute to St. Chad's. So I'm sure a lot of what I'm saying in the poem applies to St. Chad's as well. If merit, luck, or privilege affords, Wisdom trickles down here in this library, and learning for the sake of it evolves where Gothic glass yields mellow light, and scholars in black gowns climb towering stacks like bats, the higher the more erudite, on frail ladders, or with trembling bravery, unaided, clinging to the slithery books by toes and fingertips. Alas, sheer fright grips them sometimes, and they sprinkle. Apologies, Ezekiel, I didn't want to say they piss themselves, but we can live with that. They risk their necks to cleanse the idols of the day from tender minds below. The benefit drums down upon our tasselled mortarboards. Well, I'd like to read a section from another couple of sections from Nayler. I'm hoping that Neil will give me a firm indication when I'm getting at the end of my time. Nayler's great mistake was allowing himself to be persuaded to ride into Bristol in a procession that was rather like Christ's entry into Jerusalem. That's how they got him on blasphemy. But Nayler wasn't pretending. Nayler wasn't saying that he was Christ. He was expressing the Quaker view that Christ is in all of us. But they got him nonetheless. And Nayler is just telling us really what happened when they rode into Bristol. We gained the city by the Red Cliff Gate, from Bedminster into Jerusalem, as on the first Palm Sunday. We approach between the second and the third hour of the afternoon by dirty ways in which the carts and horses and none else do usually go. Thou mayst object that God expects no such extremity, but thus we persevere, in rain so hard as we receive it at our necks, it venting at our hose and breeches, singing with such a buzzing and melodious noise we cannot tell the words of what we sing. Blessed is he that cometh in the name across 4 centuries. My tired horse slithers on the unevenness of time, and shies at garments cast into the path by Martha, Hannah Stranger, and young Dorcas, who says, I raised her from the dead when she lost sense in jail in Exeter, among the beasts there, foaming out their venom. Hosanna, and Hosanna we proceed, drunk with the indignation of the Lord, as far as Broad Street, to the White Hart Inn, where the women dry their hair before the fire, and we are seized. Fresh furrows corrugate the foreheads of the magistrates, ploughed by the subtlety and reticence with which I meet their questions, when I do. Such is the singing, holy, 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 and such the concourse, that examination as night falls shall not come to much. And the final section of the whole sequence, as if he hadn't suffered enough, when he was released from prison, he set off to walk home to Yorkshire, and got as far as Harrogate, or just past Harrogate, I think, when he was set on and robbed and tied up and left for dead, really. He was found and taken to a local Quaker physician's house, but he didn't survive very long. So I'll read the final section. The road is featureless, and fields are slick beneath autumnal rain. Blackberries shrivel along hedgerows. Steeple houses point from the levels to a flat grey sky. friend at Hertford, when I stopped there, came upon me by the highway. He perceived my awful, weighty state of mind and begged to take me back with him to rest. But I refused. Such little strength I have, must push one foot before the next for home, my wife, my fields, through shrinking days, to Huntingdonshire, and then across the town, where I am seen to pass close by the Falcon Inn, where Cromwell kept his table. I am recognised as one not owning anything, a soul redeemed from earth, a stranger on it, seeking a better dwelling and inheritance. Go, saith George. Now over fenland north, the wind lamenting as it seems, that roads are still featureless except for pools of standing water, till at last, Jesus, he stinks! Get hold of him, I dare you! Do they call you Jesus? That your name, Jesus? One punches me, another shouts. Tie his hands and legs! Get hopping, Jesus man! You got no home to go to? God, you stink! In England I was 44 years to reach this mire, this night, thrown down within sight of a place named Holm, where friends would harbour me. Instead, a countryman a bit like you, his mind upon the hearthglow he is belatedly returning to in these parts, stumbles on me bound and robbed of what I know not. I have nothing.